We are going to go on to our next workshop, which is our school board workshop. And I'm so excited that we have this actually in this order because I feel like this topic has been coming up. And now we're really going to get some of the information and the tools we need. So we have talked about throughout this summit the importance of building the relationships and finding community and becoming those confident advocates for our children. Dr. Rockwell remind us one of the most meaningful ways parents can make a difference is by engaging in their local school boards. But for many of us, that is unfamiliar or even really intimidating. So our next workshop focuses on an important part of that journey, understanding the role of your local school board and how parents can engage in informed, effective ways. Advocacy doesn't always begin with a microphone at a school board meeting. More often, it begins with understanding how these decisions are made and knowing that your voice matters. And we now know that you don't have to be an expert to get involved, but understanding how school boards work, how we can get engaged in meaningful ways is another important tool for every parent, caregiver, and ally. So leading today's sessions are two incredible advocates who are passionate about helping families understand this important role that school boards make in shaping public education. So I would like to welcome Kristen Schett. I know I probably am killing the name, but she is the founder and executive director of the School Board Integrity Project. And we also have our very own Anita Carson, who is the director of field and community organizing at Equality Florida.
Hello, thank you all so much for being here. Let me go ahead and share my screen so that we can get everybody set up here. And while I'm working on that, my name is Kirsten Schuett, and I am the founder and executive director of the School Board Integrity Project. And I am so excited to be here with you all to talk about why school boards matter, which, as Jennifer just said, this is a hot topic. It's something that we are constantly talking about. And here at School Board Integrity Project, this is our bread and butter and what we focus on every single day. So like I mentioned, my name is Kirsten Schuett. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the founder and executive director of an organization called the School Board Integrity Project. I started School Board Integrity Project back in 2023, really as a response to the growing extremism on the school board level and the lack of organizations and support for school board candidates, folks who are interested in supporting their school board candidates, getting involved on the school board level. So often we think about government and politics as something that is federal or state, but 1 in 5 elected officials across the country serve on a school board, which actually makes up the largest group of elected officials in the country. And yet we really have no good organizing structure there. And so that was really where School Board Integrity Project was born. But this also comes to me from a very personal level as well. I am from Minnesota, so a bit north of Florida there. But I actually, when I was 17, was a student plaintiff against the largest school district in Minnesota after we lost 9 students to suicide, all LGBTQ, because of neutrality policies that were put in place by a very conservative school board. So that was my first bit of activism and my first interaction with, the political systems and folks making decisions on who and who doesn't belong in a school district. And so this is a deeply, deeply personal endeavor for me. And since we've started School Board Integrity Project, we have now supported more than 650 candidates across 42 states. And that number continues to grow every single day, where we're focused on recruiting, training, and electing school board members who will practice 3 things: good governance, strong, inclusive public schools, and making sure that every student can learn and thrive as their authentic selves. So nothing terribly controversial, but in this time and place that we're living, it can be. So we do everything that we can to support those candidates and get them elected, and then work with them once they're on their boards as well. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and kick it over to my co-host here, Anita, to introduce herself as well. Anita, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. And so my name's Anita Carson. I'm the Director of Organizing for Equality Florida. I started my career with Equality Florida working in 2022 on our largest ever school board elections process. But before that, for a decade, I was an educator. And so I have been on the classroom side. I have been on supporting parents and supporting students. Really, students and student-centered advocacy has been my entire life's work. And so I'm really excited to be here and share some of that with you all. I cannot count the number of school board meetings that I've attended and advocated at. I also, at this point in my career, don't know how many people I've trained to do this type of work, but I'm really excited to share some tips and tricks and things to make you more confident and more comfortable going to your school board and advocating. But I just want to put out there, I have my decade in education, but I also have been organizing for quite a long time. And so hopefully things that you learn from us today are going to be really valuable in helping you feel the most confident you can in advocating for your child and for everyone's students to have the best quality education and really supportive environment they can. So thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's dive into it here. So many of you on this call already know that school boards are really kind of the front lines when it comes to attacks on public education. And I want to be clear that that is intentional. And so I want to just level set a little bit to talk a bit about why school boards are such a target, why it is such kind of this flashpoint that we are continuing to see grow and grow, not only in places like Florida, but also all across the country and in communities, blue and purple and red and everything in between. We are really seeing school boards kind of in the crosshairs here. And so I want you to understand that school boards are low turnout but high impact elections. Like I mentioned before, these are races that there are more than 18,000 school boards across the country. And so the reality is that there are a lot of school board members, a lot of races that are super hyper local, and less than 10% of the eligible electorate is regularly voting in their school board elections. So oftentimes what we see is the loudest voices in the rooms are the ones who are actually moving these elections forward because they can genuinely be won by a couple dozen votes or 100 votes, and really those tiny margins make these races really easy to influence. So like I mentioned, these are easier to influence than most other elected offices. We can try to turn the tides in a congressional race or even a state legislature's race. But the reality is that because these are so low turnout and so hyper localized, the reality is that they're really easy to influence because they genuinely can be decided by just a handful of votes. And more than 80% of school board races go uncontested. So once somebody becomes a school board member, they're likely going to be there for a while, unless something egregious happens or the community is pushing back. Most of these races actually go uncontested. So once somebody is seated in a school board, it's pretty difficult to try to unseat them unless there's kind of a big community reckoning. And so it's also important that we understand that these races are really truly political entry points. We see so many folks who use school boards as their point of entry into politics, and then they use it as their launching pad to run for higher office, whether that be at the state level or the federal level. This really kind of is the ground level of building that political foundation for a lot of candidates, which can be good or bad, depending on who we're looking at and where we are. But the other thing is that school board elections and education issues are really powerful emotional drivers. I was backstage listening to your panel and folks with such beautiful advice. And the reality is that when we're talking about public education, when we're talking about, what students are learning or what they're exposed to in the time that they're not sitting with their parents, it is something that, really evokes a lot of emotion and fear, right? And when powers that be who don't align with our values use that to invoke fear or create, division and kind of these culture war conversations, it really kind of raises folks' hackles and they get nervous, right? The kind of what about the children of it all, if you will, right? So the reality is that these are really strong emotional drivers. And so if we're able to kind of take it down a notch and have a conversation, and really kind of root on our shared values, we're able to kind of look at this from a different lens. And the last thing I'll just say here too is that, the decisions that are made at the school board level have a huge impact on our future, right? Who's controlling what the next generation is learning? What can and can't we do and say? Who belongs and who doesn't? Whose stories are allowed to be told and whose aren't? The impacts that we have with the decisions that are made at the school board level are incredibly, incredibly influential. So let's talk just a bit about one of Anita's favorite sections is who's doing the targeting. Because if you take anything away from this conversation today, I want you to understand that this is a concerted effort and you are not crazy. There are folks who are intentionally coordinating to stoke fear, stoke division, and really kind of move this forward. It's coordinated, it's well funded. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea here of what this looks like from Moms for Liberty, who started right there in your backyard in Florida, the Heritage Foundation, if you've heard of Project 2025. Yes, they are organizing on the school board level too. And frankly, they've been doing it longer than Project 2025 and frankly, almost longer than I've been alive. So the reality is that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to that because it is the same actors. Alliance for Defending Freedom, America First Policy Institute, 1776 Project, Federalist Society, folks who want school choice or voucher programs. Basically, they want to take public tax dollars and put them into private, often religious institutions. And then state level advocacy groups as well. We see them popping up and renaming over and over again all across the country. But at the core, it really comes down to these folks. But Anita, maybe you want to dive just a bit deeper into Florida for us?
I do. So one of the things that Florida has sort of outsourced to the rest of the country is we have had some very conservative groups start here in our state. Moms for Liberty was one, the Citizens Defending Freedom is one. And one thing that we've seen here in Florida that's actually been a positive for us in the last cycle, we have a lot of even conservative leaning candidates right now that are fleeing from the Moms for Liberty crowd. Even conservative people aren't really wanting the endorsement from those groups because it's been sort of a kiss of death for their campaigns. The last cycle that we ran program for school board members was in 2024, and 78% of the endorsed Equality Florida candidates for school board won their races. People want inclusion. People want their kids to have a safe space. And when we are able to get our message out there, when we're able to make sure that people understand who are the candidates that are there to support all students and are there to support students that are marginalized, that is what the vast majority of people actually want. But because of these very concerted efforts and very well funded, not grassroots organizations pushing a very constrictive narrative, that is the piece that sort of has broken through to be out there in the world and is a very loud narrative, but that doesn't mean that it is the majority. And so that's something that I really want to make sure comes through today is the majority of people want schools to be inclusive. The majority of people want their kids to be able to see people from all different walks of life and from all different backgrounds and to be able to see themselves in their schools. And so if we keep that in mind and we keep in mind that the shared values that we have are shared by the vast majority of people, that makes our jobs a lot easier. So just keeping that in mind as we go, while Florida has been sort of the starting place of a lot of these things, it's also been the place where we've learned how to fight them appropriately and we've learned how to push them backwards. And so we're going to talk some about that today as well.
Thank you so much, Anita. And yes, Plus one, 100% when it comes to the big reminder here that the vast majority of people agree with the folks on this phone call. People understand that book banning is bad, right? And that folks who want to do those things likely aren't on the right side of history. People want folks to, or want students to be able to learn and thrive as their authentic selves, right? They want to see diverse stories. They understand that this restrictive, like I said, kind of often religious viewpoint really kind of creates more division and vitriol in communities. And when we expose that, we see that in Florida, like you said, with the wins that you all have seen at Equality Florida, but we also see that across the entire country. Like I mentioned before, we've worked with more than 650 candidates, and we have a more than 80% win rate with our candidates as well. So when we turn folks out, when we let them know the stakes, and make sure that they understand that school boards matter, then they're ultimately going to be on our side. But that's up to all of us, like Anita previewed. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So I'm interested to know in the chat for everybody. I'm interested to know what you think. Oh, sorry, I skipped a slide. I got too excited about it. But I would love to know, what do you all think these groups are trying to achieve? Why are they spending so much money, so much time and energy, focused on the school board level? I'm going to give folks just a couple of minutes here and I'll see what pops up in the chat. There are no wrong answers. I see control, fear, separation, ignorance. Yep, all of those feel right to me. Oh, a distraction from corruption. Absolutely, right? If we're looking at the shiny object over here, then you're not seeing what's happening on the base level, right? I'll give folks just a couple more seconds here that to brainwash us. Yeah, the reality is that this does someone, Jill in the chat said control. That's exactly right. Like I said before, the folks who are controlling what folks are able to learn, what voices they're able to hear, what specific worldview they want us to all kind of conform into, right? It does come out to control. Yep. I see get us back in the closet. Yeah, I think that that's right. They're trying to scare folks, right? They're trying to scare us into, a place that they felt more comfortable with, right? I was hearing in the panel some language that we maybe didn't have 10, 20 years ago, but the reality is that it's important that we continue to have these conversations. I see hate is a powerful tool. Absolutely, absolutely it is. Lack of acknowledgement, submission, and complacency. You all got it, right? The reality is that they are trying to control and impose a very specific worldview, right? And that keeps the folks who are in power. It gives them more power, right? Which ultimately we've kind of seen that domino effect, starting from the school board level. Like I mentioned before, if you've heard of Leonard Leo or Heritage Foundation or some of these folks, that has started at the school board level, and they've been telling us this is their playbook for the last 40 years that they're starting on the school board level. They're building power all the way up, all the way to take back the Supreme Court, which they ultimately did, and really roll back the progress that we've made. Yeah, and indoctrination, I mean, you all have it, right? The reality is that they're not doing this because they're concerned parents, even though that's the kind of cloak that they like to pretend that they're hiding under. And some folks maybe have some valid concerns. I want to be able to acknowledge that, right? But the vast majority of this conversation, these talking points that are national, that make their way down into our communities, that really have no bearing on our school districts and our local communities, we can see through all of that, right? And we're going to give you some opportunities to push back. So, like I mentioned, what can we do to fight back, right? The reality here is that I want to leave you with some good news. We have tremendous power at the school board level. Like both Anita and I had mentioned, when we lead with our values, when we kind of help uncover what's happening on the surface here, and we really dig down to the root in our shared values with communities, people are with us, right? And so we want to make sure that we're leading with our values so that we can help more people understand why school boards matter. Because, like I said, less than 10% of the eligible electorate regularly votes in their school board elections, right? So we need to tell everybody that we know. And I saw, there's about 100 of us or so on this call, and it's been fluctuating, which is excellent. If all of us tell 10 people, we're going to flip some school boards in Florida, right? And beyond. So the reality is that we need to support strong candidates to run and lead. And we need to show up, be heard, and start community conversations and build coalitions that support inclusive public schools. So I'm going to tell you just a quick acronym, and then Anita is going to dive into my favorite part, which is storytelling. But I want you all to always remember that school boards matter, and matter is an acronym that we use very frequently here. And so first, we need you to start with an M, which is map your school board environment. Think about who the allies on your school board are. Think about who the not so friendly folks on your school board are, or the folks who are movable depending on the issue and if they're hearing from their constituents, right? We want you to activate your community. Find the allies, find the other groups and other like-minded folks who may be moving towards the similar outcome, right? So your local teachers unions, your local PTA or PFLAGs or other organizations as well, which I know some of you have heard from some of those folks or will be hearing from them later today as well. Folks who share your values, make sure they're aware of what's going on, because so often this happens behind closed doors at school board meetings. People are busy, parents are busy, and so they might not necessarily know what's going on there. So making sure that we're activating our community. T, we're going to tell the story of what's happening in our schools, which Anita is going to dive a little bit deeper into in just a moment for us. It is the bread and butter of everything that we do, is about telling the story of what's happening to engage people and bring them along with us. T, we're going to take action locally when decisions are being made. I want to be clear, this isn't just a reactive response either. So often we hear about things when they're, at kind of a flashpoint, or when it's so far gone that they're going to take a vote and there's nothing else that we can really do about it other than kind of watch it unfold, right? Or show up with some signs and some opposition. But we need to be proactive in our districts as well. Wouldn't it be great if we were looking for good policy and we were advocating for good things we want to see rather than just reacting to all of the bad? So I just want people to remember that we can take action locally and push other decisions that we'd like to see that are in the positive direction as well. Like I said before, E is electing leaders who support inclusive schools. I see some questions in the chat about how to find some of those leaders. Happy to dive into that a little bit deeper with our Q&A. And then we repeat and grow the movement, because school board elections happen every 2 years. So this is going to be a constant cycle that we have to kind of be ready for all the time. At School Board Integrity Project, the reality is that we have school board elections every single 6 months or so across the country, depending on where you are. Some of them are in the spring, some of them are in the fall on a typical timeline, some of them are off year. So just remember when your school board elections are happening, and then make sure that we're ready to repeat and grow the movement, because this is how we make progress. So as promised, I want to give some time to Anita here to talk a little bit more about diving deeper into that first T, which is telling the story of our public schools. So Anita, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So this is really diving into when you have an issue that you're wanting to talk to your school board about. You've tried with your local principal, or you've tried to talk to someone in the district, but whatever you are needing is not getting solved at a lower level. How do you connect with the school board? How do you push for something with the school board? And what are some of the best practices that you can utilize to really get what you are looking for? And so with that, when we're talking about school board, you want as many people going with you to those meetings as you can get. Generally, the two things that school boards do not like in their wheelhouse is lawsuits and bad press. And so if you are showing up with a large group of people and you're asking for them to do something, they are more likely to move towards that thing if you have a larger group of people than just one or two people showing up. Generally, you don't even have to have everyone speak at the mic, but if you have some way that they're all visually in the audience together, so maybe you're all wearing the same sticker, you're all wearing the same shirt, or something that makes it very clear that you're all together in that space, and then one or two people speak, that's generally plenty. You don't have to have everyone speak, and not everyone's comfortable speaking. But once you've decided who is going to be that person who speaks for your group, and you've shown up at the school board, here is what I would recommend if you are going to speak. It's the most effective way to engage, and it is the most effective thing we have as far as testimonies at school board and at other elected officials' dioceses. So, starting with naming your connection to the community. Where are you from? Are you a parent? Let them know what you have in connection to their community. Tell them why they should care about what you have to say. So, for example, if I go to, I'm in Polk County, which is super conservative area, and I taught in Polk County for a decade. If I were to go and talk to our school board right now, I would be able to say that I taught in Polk County for a decade. I've lived here since 2013. I've taught over 1,000 students. I've been connected with parents for a long time, and I've been working in advocacy spaces for a while. I'm part of my local political board. I am part of the Rotary Club in my area. And so all of those things that I can name that say why I'm a valuable person to listen to. Yours might be different. You might be able to say, I have 3 kids who go to this district and they are in elementary, middle, and high school. So as a parent, I have a good look and a solid look at what happens in this district because I see every single level. Whatever it is, it's your connection. Start with your conversation to the school board with your connection. Tell them why you're important to listen to. Then share a personal story or experience that illustrates how either a decision they've already made or a decision that they're coming to is going to impact your family. So, for example, if you are trying to advocate for every school to have at least one easily accessible single use restroom so that anyone of any gender can go to that bathroom without having any fear of being misgendered or having to go to the wrong restroom, you can talk about how that would impact your student, your child, or maybe even the child of a friend. That is going to be much more impactful than giving them percentages and data. I know for most of us, we want to show up seeming like we have done all of our homework and we've read everything we can, and we want to be the biggest source of information we can. And I know this sounds a little ironic, but we have data that says that's not what actually changes people's minds. What changes people's minds is an emotional story that is connected to whatever it is that you're talking about. And this is true whether you're talking to conservative school board members, more progressive school board members, anyone in between. If they have a personal and emotional story connected to the policy that you are trying to talk to them about, they are more likely to listen. That doesn't mean they're going to listen the first time. Generally speaking, just from an organizing perspective, someone takes about 15 different touches before they're likely to change their behavior or their thought process. And so if you're the first person speaking to them about this, don't expect it to change overnight. It's not going to be a change overnight. But if you have a concerted effort and continued political pressure and continued public pressure, you can move people with emotional storytelling and continued pressure. Doesn't happen every time, but it is the most effective thing we have. Once you've shared your personal story about how what they're doing is impacting you, whatever that is, then you have to add your ask at the end. This is something that sounds very easy, but it's also something that a lot of people forget. They tell their impactful story, they tell them how this is impacting their kids, and then they go and sit down. You have to have the solution, or at least an idea of a solution, and ask them to make that change. So I am here today to ask you to ensure that every single school has at least one gender neutral bathroom that is easily accessible to students so that none of our kids are stuck being in a place where they can't use the restroom throughout the day. And then if you are there with a large group, try to make sure that that ask is the same across the board. If you have 5 people asking for the same thing, it's a lot easier for the board to know what you're wanting them to do. But if you're all coming with a different solution, it becomes a little more muddled and it becomes a little bit harder for them to do what you're needing them to do. So start by telling them who you are, tell them your emotional story attached to your policy, and then end it with an ask every single time. When you're going to a school board meeting, pretty much across the state, I haven't found a district yet that doesn't have some type of time limit for people who are speaking on off agenda items. Generally, it's going to be around 3 minutes. Sometimes if there's only 2 or 3 people speaking, they won't even measure it. They'll just stop you if you're going a bit too long. But especially in meetings where there's a lot of people speaking, they might have a visual clock that tells you how long you have, or they might be very strict. Some of our districts are very strict, and they will cut off your mic the moment you get to 2 minutes, 59 seconds, and 59 hundredths of a second. I don't know. They will stop you very, very quickly. But some of the districts are a little more forgiving. If you get to your 3 minutes and there's large crowds, sometimes they'll cut it down even further and they'll say everyone gets 1 minute. So always come prepared, knowing that you're going to have an amount of time that you can take, but have a shorter version with you. That way, if they do cut you down to that 1 minute or 2 minute time frame, you're not flustered trying to figure out what you should still include or what you need to cut. Come with the shorter version. That way, you know you can still get your main points across. The next piece I would say that's really important to keep in mind as you're talking to your school board is being direct and being assertive, especially for people who grew up and were trained as females in our community. Women are often told to go along to get along, to be quiet, to not say things, that rocking the boat is in some way antithetical to doing good or being a good human. Advocating for your community is never rude. Being assertive about what your kids need and what your community needs is not rude. So be direct about what you're asking for. Be assertive. I'm not saying be mean, but be direct about what you're wanting. If you are indirect, if you're beating around the bush and not quite saying the thing you want, sometimes you can lose people entirely. You might risk being either misunderstood or running out of time. So you've talked so much, you run out of time to even make the ask that you wanted to make. So be direct, be assertive, and know that advocating for yourself, for your children, for your community, none of those things are rude. None of those things make you somehow inherently bad for rocking the boat. You're not rocking the boat. You are trying to make sure that people in your community have what they need from your schools. And then the last thing I want to say is you're here to talk about how their decisions are impacting you. They're the ones that have the power in this situation as far as what can happen. You are there telling them what you need. That is a hugely impactful piece. And the more people that exist there, the harder it is for them to say no, because they only derive their power from people voting them into office. And so if they start to realize that lots and lots of people don't like what they are doing, they risk being voted out. They risk losing that seat of power. And so they are more likely to listen the more people you have showing up. Can we go to that? Yeah. I would always try to lead with shared values as much as you can. Conservative, progressive, in-betweens. We all want things like ensuring students can thrive. That's a very fluffy statement that anyone could say. You're going to give it some specifics when you get to your ask, but if you start with ensuring that all students can thrive, fostering belonging in our community, reducing negative outcomes, phrases like these are really important to help make sure that people feel like they are on your side before you even really get into the meat of what you want to say. But when you were talking about marginalized communities, a lot of times people don't want to completely name the harm. They like to not talk about racism or structural issues. They might not want to talk about homophobia. They might not want to talk about other pieces that are real and exist. So when you're talking about marginalized communities, don't shy away from naming the harm. If something is happening in your local community and it is due to some type of structural issue, name the harm, say what that thing is, and don't shy away from it. It is a lot easier to get what you are needing when you name what's actually happening. And then I hate to say this, but pretty much every elected official can be pushed towards doing the right thing if they realize that doing the wrong thing will have an economic impact. So one of the ways that Moms for Liberty was great at getting school boards to move was they threatened lawsuits left, right, and center all the time. And the reason that even some of our more progressive school boards moved in the ways they did was because they were worried about being in a lawsuit, which is really expensive. What we need them to understand is if you are taking away things from our students, if you are taking away things from our families, there's not just one side that can bring a lawsuit. If you are discriminating against people, if you are pushing people out of schools, if you are not providing what you are legally required to provide, which is equal protection under the law, that is not the only side that can do that. So having some type of conversation around how they can be impacted negatively with money is not a bad thing at all. I wouldn't take it as my first swipe, but if you've been going for a few meetings and they're still not moving, bringing that concept forward is not a bad idea. One thing that I always love to engage and let people know about is anytime you go to a school board meeting, most of the time there will be some type of local press there. They cover the meetings if anything happens. If you have a small group of people showing up to talk about an issue, they might come and speak to you. First off, you never have to engage with media. You are not required to engage with media in any way, even if they ask. So I just want to start there. I don't want anyone to be worried that if someone comes and talks to you, you have to. However, if for some reason you do want to get your story out broader and you want to talk to media about what you're talking about, I would always say to check their credentials before you say yes. So look for a press pass that has the name of who they are working for. I've never met a journalist that doesn't have a business card with them that tells them exactly who they work for, what the news company name is. Journalists like to network, so I've never met a single one that doesn't have a business card in their pocket. The best information I can give you about which sources to talk to is really quite simple. If it's not a source you would trust to get your news from, don't give them your voice. If you know your local news stations and you know that this one doesn't really cover the news very fairly, or you don't think they cover it very fairly, don't give them your voice. This is especially true when you get to like rage bait bloggers and people like that. They will show up with a camera in your face asking you questions. You do not have to respond. If you do an interview, repeat your key points. Doesn't matter what question they ask you. If they start talking to you about drama at the school board, you don't have to respond to the drama. You can use a phrase that helps you clarify. You can say, hey, the most important thing to remember is our students need these single gender bathrooms, or they need these any gender bathrooms because no one should have to go all day without going to the restroom. They just asked you about school board drama. You gave them a soundbite about what you actually want them to know. That person that you're interviewing with is not your audience. Your audience is the people they're going to air it to. And what you want them to hear is your soundbite. Don't give them anything else. If you're going to talk to media, that is a huge piece. I gave some pivot phrases here that you can utilize to do that. And then when in doubt, always go back to that personal story and experiences. That is really the thing, whether you're talking to school board members or to the general public, that's the piece that moves people to action. That'll get them to call the school board or email or things like that. Next slide.
Amazing. All right. Well, I'm going to talk really quickly through a couple of guides, and then I did drop in the chat. We have a couple of minutes for Q&A, so please feel free to drop anything that you have for Anita or I. We're happy to answer them, and then also take any questions we can't get to in the time we have left offline. But Anita, such great content. As a Midwesterner, the advocating for your community is not rude. I wrote that and circled it in my notebook, so thank you for teaching us that today. Like I mentioned, I know we've covered a lot and we could talk about school boards. I know Anita and I could talk about school boards all day long, but you all have such incredible content that you are going to continue to move throughout the day. So I wanted to leave you with some guides here. And thank you so much. We also just linked these guides in the chat. Thank you, Equality Florida Tech team. But there's also some QR codes here on the screen for you. So first and foremost, we have School Boards Matter. This is a guide to effectively advocating at the school board level that School Board Integrity Project co-developed with the Human Rights Campaign and their Welcoming Schools team. this really is the foundation that you need for anything that may come up at the school board level. Some more information, like Anita talked about storytelling, time limits. How do you dispel myths versus facts? How do you effectively advocate? How do you find the allies in your community, mapping your school board? It is all here in School Boards Matter. So please, please download that guide. If you don't look at any other guides, I promise you that one will have what you need to answer some questions, regardless of where you are in Florida or across the country. And then we have confronting censorship in our schools. I know that so many folks are growing increasingly concerned with the, book bans, censorship, obviously the Mahmoud decision that was made at the Supreme Court. There are so many questions, and it's intentionally pretty opaque right now. So this is a guide for you. What happens if folks are trying to ban books in your school district? What can you or can't you do? What does this all look like? Confronting censorship in our schools is a companion guide to School Boards Matter, specifically focused on censorship and limitations on the freedom to read and learn. So really good information there. And then if you may, in the back of your mind, be thinking about running for school board, we are here to help you as well. Like I said, this is what School Board Integrity Project was founded for, to make sure that we are able to support candidates who are thinking about running. There is a starter guide, just a dip of the toe into the conversation of maybe thinking about it. We have a guide called Run for What Matters, which is a starting point for running for school board. All of these links, like I mentioned, are in the chat. They'll also be emailed to you, but feel free to scan the QR codes as well. But this is kind of a real kind of table set for you. And with that, we have just a couple of minutes for Q&A. So what questions do you all have? Feel free to jump into the chat here. I do want to just acknowledge one question that I saw earlier, Anita, which is how do we identify candidates that align with our values? I know you have a question from, or you have an answer from Equality Florida, but would love your thoughts there too.
So we at Equality Florida interview and get questionnaires from no, we survey thousands of candidates across the state. We interview and get questionnaires from hundreds of them, and then from there they go through an endorsement process. We do have our endorsed candidates at a Equality Florida PAC page. We have a whole page that will tell you who's endorsed in your area. We are also in the process of doing the work, putting in the work. So my team right now, between July 18th and August 18th, we'll run 50 different days of door knocking for candidates across the state. And so depending on where you are in your communities, we looked at the boards across the state that we thought we could either flip to more progressive boards or really shore up to make sure we had strong champions. And so those are the places where we're doing door knocking across the state. And like I said, we got 50 actions between July 18th and August 18th that you can join. So if you have any questions about that, I put my email in the chat as well. But yes, one of the easiest things you can do when we talk about going and speaking to school boards, and that is definitely and very imperative. But talking to people who are already friendly to your message is a lot easier than talking to people that are not wanting to engage in conversations around LGBTQ rights, that are not wanting to talk about your child and their needs. So getting people elected who are already wanting to engage in this work and just need guidance in how to is one of the easiest and best things we can do. And in Florida, most school board elections are going to be decided in the primaries. The only ones that will be decided in November are the ones that go to runoff. But most school board members, like Kristen said earlier, a lot of them have already won the race because they were not challenged. But most of them only have two people running at a time. Very few of them have more than two people running, and so almost all of them will be decided in August. And so I would highly recommend anyone who has not already gotten involved in what your local school board elections look like. You've got about a month until election day is here. And so this is a great time to get involved in that space if that's something you're interested in doing.
And I'll just say, I saw that folks, I think it was maybe Heather in the chat was like, the primaries, the primaries. Yes, the primaries. So absolutely. I did also just want to just quickly say, I dropped School Board Integrity Project's website in the chat. We are actually actively putting up our school 2026 class of candidates across the country, including some first from Florida. So stay tuned. But we have a pledge that candidates can take, which just says, yes, I align with the values of integrity, respect, excellence, belonging, and trust, and I will practice good governance, support academic excellence and freedom, and strong inclusive public schools. So that is there for you. So you can read that pledge, see all that information, find other resources there. You can also email me if you have any questions. My email is in the chat as well, but also look for other signals that align with your values. Like I said, teachers union endorsements, organizations or leaders that you know in your community that you trust, the lawn sign of your neighbor who you look at every election to see where they're voting, right? Talk to the people you know and trust, talk to those who are plugged in. That is the best way to identify candidates who are going to be aligned with your values. And I know we are up on time, but if you have any other additional questions, Anita and I would be happy to take those on offline as well. But thank you all so much for being here today, and we look forward to connecting with you all soon.